It's finally here. The game. Michigan takes on its biggest and only rival. Next on Michigan Podcast.
There's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Yes, caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's edition of Michigan Podcast, maybe the biggest episode of the season because it has finally arrived. After a year worth of waiting, it's here. The game. The biggest game on Michigan's schedule, the Wolverines take on their biggest and really only rival. In-state rival. Sometimes little brother, although not too often enough in recent years, I'm afraid. The Michigan State Spartans will host Michigan on Saturday. Couple of trends going into the game, and one of them's got to give. Jim Harbaugh, as a player and a coach, has never lost in Spartan Stadium. On the other hand, he's never beaten a top 15 ranked team on the road as the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. The Michigan program hasn't won a game on the road against a top 15 ranked team since that glorious dismantling of number 2 Notre Dame early in the 2006 season. Michigan State, of course, has the bye week. They've had 2 full weeks to prepare for this, but let's face it. When it comes to Michigan State, they've had 365 days to prepare for this. Michigan, on the other hand, had the bye week prior to Northwestern, and Jim Harbaugh openly said they spent the bye week preparing for future opponents. That meant Michigan State. And I think you could see that in how lethargic Michigan looked offensively in the first half against Northwestern before making quick work in the third quarter and then moving on. And then you saw literally 3 seconds after that game was over, Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan players were moving on. They've got a lot to prove on Saturday. A year ago, Michigan was 23-point favorites at home to Michigan State in absolutely one of the worst losses Michigan football has had, certainly the worst since the Toledo game in 2008. Michigan State, a program that was in complete rebuild mode with a new head coach in Mel Tucker, who had no offseason with his team. He was the last head coach hired at a school. And then, of course, COVID shut down his offseason. Michigan came in arrogant, cocky after destroying Minnesota on national TV the week prior, got punched in the mouth, and never recovered. In fact, the entire Michigan season didn't recover. You could say that that loss to Sparty led to 7 Michigan football coaches. Well, 6 got fired. One of them left on his own to be the head coach at Buffalo. So you could say that loss to Michigan State triggered a chain of events last year that led to 6 new coaches on the Michigan staff, 6 Michigan coaches, assistants losing their jobs, maybe the head coach almost losing his job as well. And now we have come full circle. A lot of us as Michigan fans wondering, is it smoke and mirrors? Are we being set up again? Because it's clear the downfield passing game is still struggling, but offensively, when it comes to a punishing running game, maybe the best running game in the sport. A defense that has rebounded strong under new defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, number 2 in the nation right now in scoring defense, and then maybe the best special teams unit in America. Those units are elite, the running game, the defense, the special teams. But as Michigan fans, we've seen this before in the Harbaugh era. We know to go from that pretty good program hovering around 8 to 15 in the rankings to truly competing for a spot in the playoffs and to win the first Big Ten championship for this school in 17 years. I cannot believe that's true. It's the longest championship drought we have ever had as a program. We know that that means we've got to have elite or at least a lot better quarterback play, and it's got to be a lot better than this. Look at this stat from Saturday against Northwestern. Michigan had more yards per rush than per pass attempt. That's a great stat if it's 1978, because in 2021, that is beating nobody meaningful, especially on the road in today's college football. So a lot of this falls on Cade McNamara. He was really good on the road against Wisconsin. I think that was his best game. And then pretty good on the road against Nebraska. Had some errant throws, made some mistakes, but also led 3 valiant scoring drives in response to Nebraska punching the Wolverines in the mouth. So Michigan is battle-tested on the road. I think the fact the game is played at noon and not at night is a slight edge to Michigan as well, just because that just adds extra juice to the home crowd. But it really comes down to is this. You know Mel Tucker, defensive coordinator, defensive guy. You know Michigan State's pulling people out of the damn stands to stack the box. They're going to be like, dude, we won't even cover receivers. We'll dare Cade McNamara to hit him 7-on-7 style. You're not running the ball against us. We know that is coming. Now, we knew that was coming against Wisconsin, too. And a lot of us, myself included, thought that the Wolverines would just be stubborn and beat their head against the wall and end up losing. They didn't. They came out guns firing, flea flicker early, softened up the Wisconsin defense. And yeah, they didn't run it great. I think Michigan still has like 1/3 of the rushing yards, though, Wisconsin has given up this entire season. They ran it enough. That will be the key on Saturday, running it enough. And then for the Michigan defense, there's going to be a lot of eye candy. There's going to be a lot of misdirection. I believe Michigan State has run some form of a flea flicker in every game so far this season. What we've seen with Michigan is a couple of times in the second half, opposing offenses have realized we just cannot come right at these guys. We can't move the ball. Let's try to trick them. And it has worked a time or two, like it did for Northwestern with a big run. That was really its only play of the entire game. And Michigan State's got a lot better skill players than Northwestern does with that misdirection. So Michigan maintaining eye discipline against all the eye candy and misdirection for Sparty. And then can we get the Cade McNamara? I think Michigan's offensive line, running game, are good enough that if we get the Cade McNamara we got against Nebraska and Wisconsin, Michigan will win. But if we don't, it's going to make that 7-0 feel really hollow. And that brings us to our friends over at DraftKings. If you're a football fan and you're hungry for a big win this week, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, they've got you covered. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets on a $5 bet. That is some winner chicken dinner. You can't beat it. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use the promo code MichiganPodcast to bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and win $200 in free bets if they do win. You win with the promo code Michigan Podcast this week only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And remember, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Gambling Disorder Helpline at 800-270-7117. 21 and older, Michigan only. Eligibility restrictions apply. And see DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. Time now for the 10-minute war, and we are joined by our friend and maybe the one and only reasonable Bucknut himself, Mark Rogers, who has a fantastic channel here, the voice of college football, right here on YouTube. Make sure you check it out. You might make you some money checking it out as well. Good to see you, brother. How you been?
I'm doing well, Steve. This is what we've all been waiting for how long? This is the weekend.
It is. I mean, this is a killer weekend. One of the best weekends in probably all of Big Ten history. You've got Iowa at Wisconsin, Penn State at Ohio State, Michigan at Michigan State. On Penn State, Ohio State, I don't know if you've seen the video from James Franklin's press conference this week, where he referred to being focused on Illinois twice. Talked about going to play at the Big House at Ohio Stadium. This is legit, dude. And this is on the heels of the news that came out yesterday that he has fired his agent and hired SEC super agent Jimmy Sexton. And on Saturday, Bruce Feldman at The Athletic, who's as tied into the coaching carousel as maybe any member of the college football media is, said that James Franklin was one of the top candidates for both LSU and USC. What do you make of all of that? Put that all together for us, Mark. What's it mean?
We all misspeak at times, but when there's three in the span and they're faux pas to that degree, boy, you talk about being distracted. You would think that he would be able to mirror that or hide that a little bit better than he does. It reminds me of some other leadership we're accustomed to seeing on a regular basis. So that is atrocious. That is just I had not heard. I had heard about the agent decision, but I had not heard about the news conference. I typically tape all the ones on the Big Ten Network on Mondays, but I had not come across James Franklin. But man, yeah, that is really bad. And if he's distracted to that point, man, he is packed his bags and left town already.
Are you saying we're about 10 minutes away from James Franklin alternating whisper screams and sniffing hair? Is that what I hear? Are you intimating that maybe, Mark, perhaps?
Well,
no names mentioned, of course.
Maybe not to that level.
Gotcha.
Of cringeworthiness, but elsewhere, yes, he seems to have checked. If that's any indication, and again, we'll give him one. Shoot, I say things all the time on call-in shows and all sorts of analysis that if you really know, okay, he misspoke, he didn't mean that particular player. He said Jeff Jenkins, the old Brewers hitter, instead of Jeff Collins, the Georgia Tech head coach. You know, those sorts of things. When we've been around sports forever, you do those things, and you talk constantly. You do that, but Mike, those are atrocious.
Sure. I mean, I say all kinds of stupid things while trying to be smart, so I get it. Okay. 1 week from today, we will be on the cusp of the unveiling of the first college football playoff rankings. So I decided to take a stab at if we were doing them this week. Not just what I think myself. I mean, it is my ballot, but it's also an approximation of what I think the rankings themselves will look like. All right. So I want to get your take on it. So this would be my ballot. I've got a top four of Georgia, Alabama, Cincinnati, and Oregon. If there are very few, when you look at both the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee and the College Football Playoff Committee, since it changes over every few years, there's very few consistencies. But in the college basketball selection process, the strength of your non-conference schedule has been a consistent parameter every year, regardless of who's on the committee. And so far, in the 7 years we've been doing the college football playoff, head-to-head, when teams have the same or better records, has also been a constant, which is why if they win on Saturday, Oregon, and they both win, Oregon, I'm 100% convinced, will be rated ahead of Ohio State in the very first poll because they beat them on the field. So this is what I've got right now, putting it back up. Georgia, Alabama, Cincinnati, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Michigan State and Ole Miss is what I think the top 10 would be if we had the playoff rankings this week. Ole Miss, Wake Forest, and Notre Dame are in that coveted top 12 for a New Year's 6 berth. And then you see I've got Texas A&M, by far the highest rated 2-loss team. And you see the rest of my poll of what I think. There you see Auburn's playing better football right now. But again, same amount of losses. Penn State beat them on the field. So that's what I think if we had a top 25 college football playoff committee poll. That's what I think it would be, both my ballot, but also what I think it would look like. What are your thoughts?
It magnifies what we need to do with a group of 5, that there needs to be a decision, a formal decision about to include them or exclude them, because Cincinnati is such an outlier from a strength of schedule standpoint. I made a comparison. Nobody's talking about Wake Forest, partially because nobody considers them to be that good of a team, and also because their schedule's backloaded and they play their 4 toughest opponents at the end. And if they take care of business, we'll deal with it then. So nobody expects that. But I did a comparison between Wake Forest's schedule, which is considered to be weak, and Cincinnati's, and it's not even close, and certainly won't be. The distance is going to grow even wider, the gap between the quality of the 2 schedules. So what to do with Cincinnati? No other team in the nation gets to say, we beat one good team. We beat Notre Dame. They're a top 15 team. We're in the playoff. That's all we needed to do. That was our one
right.
Check mark. Nobody else gets to do that. Why does Cincinnati get to do that? And I've been the guy that's been the champion of the small guy, the little guy, the group of 5 guy, to say, hey, we need to provide them a space. But I just can't in any way justify Cincinnati making a playoff if they carve up the rest of this schedule when their second best win is going to be SMU.
I think the political pressure. If Notre Dame's 11-1, and if you look at the rest of Notre Dame's schedule, it very well could be. If Notre Dame is 11-1 and their one loss was by double digits at home to Cincinnati, and SMU's only 2 losses of the entire season are to Cincinnati, the public media and public pressure on this committee to put Cincinnati in that final top 4, provided they're undefeated, of course, I think it will be overwhelming. Especially
and I don't have an issue with that.
Especially because how good is Oklahoma, for example? Okay, I think it will be. Now, if they're undefeated, they're going to be in the playoff. But I think it'll be overwhelming. I do.
Now, I don't have an issue with that because Cincinnati's done what they can do. And then, of course, they went out and scheduled Notre Dame and Indiana. So I'm not blaming Cincinnati. So this is not
Sure, but no, you bring up a
guy.
good point. You bring up a good point, as you often do. That's why I ask you questions like this.
The other team that jumps out to me is, of course, Oregon. I got to think that the committee, there are certain committee members, and this is a smart thing to do for self-preservation and PR from a PR standpoint, is to be looking down the road and thinking, if we put this team here and A, B, and C happen, we can't box ourselves into a corner. Although it's 7 years into this, I think the committee's already done that a number of times, and they can explain away their decisions in whatever fashion they want. But to put Oregon at 4, wow, that's obviously they have the best non-conference win, maybe the best win, but the best non-conference win for sure in the country. But other than that, Oregon, again, it's
so who's 4 then? Oklahoma's best win is a 3-loss Texas. Ohio State's best win is Maryland.
So like what the committee is supposed to be doing, I'm a resume guy. So my resume says Georgia, Oklahoma, Michigan, Michigan State are the 4 best teams in the country based on resume. I don't believe them to be the 4 best.
Okay.
But obviously we have yet to figure out conference championships and all of that. So
that's why I'm not really worried about the whole Michigan State, Ohio State thing, because those teams are all going to play each other, right? That's going to get decided on the field. But what does bother me, and you know me, you've known me long enough to know, I strive to be consistent. Like I was the Michigan fan in 2006 that was like, dude, I absolutely want to play Ohio State again. But frankly, if the shoe was on the other foot, if I'm Florida, what did I did nothing wrong. And so I got 1 loss. I didn't get a chance to play Ohio State. Michigan did. They lost. Michigan could have played their way in. How is that fair to us? We played in a tougher league. So I actually thought the right decision was made to put Florida against Ohio State that year. And then Florida proved it on the field that the right decision was made. The reality is, if the situation was on the other foot, there is not any Big Ten fan of any school with an IQ above 3 that would be saying, you know, I really think that because we knocked off Indiana, who's a friggin' JV team with 7 starters out, and blew the hell off of Maryland doing their perennial basketball. Look at my jersey. Basketball practice started, shut it down. All right, that just means that game doesn't count. The games have to count, Mark. The games, otherwise, don't play them. Then don't even play Ohio State and Oregon, and let's just do this by recruiting rankings every single year and not have a season. The games that are played have to count.
Steve, you are talking my game. You were talking exactly what I am. And to your consistency piece, I'm the Ohio State fan that ranted and raved in 2016 after the announcement was made, even though Ohio State had the better record and the better out-of-conference resume, that Penn State was ripped off. They should have been in the playoff. They won head-to-head. They won the Big Ten championship. So in a similar vein, I believe that Ohio State's a better team than Oregon. But it shouldn't matter what I think.
I agree.
Oregon
I agree.
got on an
if I'm betting on a rematch,
Ohio, and won the game.
If I'm betting on a rematch in any stadium in the world, and you force me to bet, I'm going to bet on Ohio State. But this is, again, it's a season. It's not a projection. And this is my problem with this playoff format, though, from the very beginning. It's not a playoff. It's an invitational. And so everything is very subjective. That's why I am very, very confident that if both Ohio State and Oregon have the same record next Tuesday, Oregon's going to be ranked higher. Now, where those two teams will be, I don't know, 3-4, 2-3, 5-6, I don't know. But Oregon will be higher. But where you will see the skullduggery come into play is at the end of the year, if Ohio State is just absolutely curb-stomped Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State on its way, and Iowa or Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament, Big Ten championship, and then Oregon's best win since beating Ohio State is Ohio State. Looking at the rest of the Pac-12, where right now the South champion looks like it's going to have a minimum of 3 losses between Utah and UCLA, a minimum of 3. Okay, so that's where the skullduggery will come in. That's where the reverse engineering will come in and say, well, we kept Oregon there all season long, but we looked at the resumes, as you said, because no one would argue outside of that game. Ohio State clearly has the better resume. But week one, they're going to honor the head-to-head. That's what they've done the whole time for 7 years. They've honored head-to-head.
I hope so, Steve. And if your feedback that you get from your viewership is similar to mine, I am astounded at how many people, even non-Ohio State fans, could care less about that result.
Yeah,
they say
like
Ohio
the game
State's
wasn't
better.
played. Then why did we watch? Why did they play the game? Why does it count? Why don't we take the win away from Oregon and just give it to Ohio State because we agree Ohio State's the better team? Then why play the game?
Absolutely. I am amazed. I release a top 25 every week that people basically want me just to tell them who the best teams are, regardless of what's happened on the field.
Right.
And I build a resume-based rankings, and they
get mad at guys in the media who think they're experts and know-it-alls. After asking us to supersede the results on the field, then they get mad that we think we're a bunch of experts and know-it-alls. There you go. Yes.
But the people that watch me, most of them want that to be done. So they are okay with 13 people going into a room and coming out and saying those are the 4 best teams, and they buy that. They think that that's the conclusion that they want, and that's been decided, and they're good with that. They don't question that.
That's shocking
typically
to me because I can't think of anything I've witnessed in the last, say, 19 or 20 months that has indicated to me that a large segment of Americans really don't want to have to think for themselves or make any decisions for themselves whatsoever. So I am totally blindsided by this news, Mark. Moving on, let's get to Michigan versus Michigan State. So Michigan, tell me who, if you think this, if it doesn't matter. Michigan had a bye and then essentially had a second bye playing Northwestern, if we're being honest. Sparty has a full bye, though, and 2 weeks to prepare. Is there any advantage there whatsoever in the setup to the game?
I think there's always advantage to rest and preparation. I think the better coaching staffs typically win bowl games. That's why Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, and we can go to other examples, Dabo Swinney, have excellent bowl records because they've got more time to prepare and they're smarter. And their coaching staff is better prepared and implements that better than their competition. So there's something to that. Now, whether Mel Tucker and his coaching staff fit that bill, I'm not completely convinced. I think he's the right man for the job. I think he's done a great job. They have yet to beat a winning team. And I do believe that Michigan is the better team, but of course they're playing on the road. And Michigan State's playing very loose brand of football, and I say that in a positive way. They're tight on offense and defense schematically, but I think that they understand, they feel really good about where they are. They didn't expect to be at this place. And maybe Michigan's finally gotten to the point where they were a very tightly wrapped team emotionally and mentally, and now they've kind of cut it loose, and they seem to have gained this level of confidence where, okay, we are good. We can win close games.
So when you look at the resumes of these two teams, I think they're actually very similar. They're at the time impressive non-conference dominant wins in both cases have not worn well, both for Michigan State against Miami and for Michigan against Wisconsin. I don't think Michigan has played a team that right now has a winning record either. Now, Michigan's part of the reason for that, in the case of, say, Nebraska and Wisconsin, but I think that stat that you mentioned to Michigan State applies to Michigan too. I think you've got
other than Wisconsin,
which is, you're right, they're 4-3 now, so there is a winning record there now. You're right about that. I think they'll be 5-3 after this weekend, actually. But to me, I wonder when I look at, I've watched a lot of Michigan State, and what I see is, from a passing game standpoint, overall, I think I've said this to you before, their coaches have done a phenomenal job of keeping it simple, stupid. All right, we're going to run downhill with a really good running back who would be a Heisman finalist right now if we were voting. And their passing game, a lot of it is either verticals or checkdowns. Like we're not running a lot of NFL route trees and combo routes and multiple reads, and that has worked well for Peyton Thorne. Now he has thrown a pick after having a Justin Fields 14-1 touchdown interception ratio the first few games. He's thrown a pick now in consecutive games. Whereas Michigan, what's fascinating, when you watch the film on Michigan, and former Michigan quarterback Devin Gardner has been doing this every week, and he really showed it this week, the amount of open receivers that Cade McNamara just doesn't even see. And it ain't like with our offensive line, he's under a lot of pressure. I think he's been sacked twice all year long. We're just talking he just gets up there pre-snap and decides where he's going to throw the ball and doesn't look. And even Harbaugh has talked for the last couple of weeks about, quote, leaving meat on the bone. If you look at Pro Football Focus's analytics, and if you look at EPA, the expected points analytic, which is very key, McNamara is 78th, Mark, amongst college quarterbacks out of 130. 78th in EPA. I would venture a guess there's never been a team in modern college football history, since we've been keeping the stat here for the last 10 years, that has been 7-0 with a quarterback 78th in EPA, because that means you're leaving a lot of points out on the field. So I think that this is a game where both teams have real quarterback questions. I think you've maybe seen evidence going in the last 2 weeks that maybe we're hitting some regression in the mean for Michigan State, like they've maybe maxed out their talent, and you've kind of seen it the last couple of games. You look at, Michigan number 2 in scoring defense. So I really think that this, maybe we're kind of back to what we thought of these teams in the preseason, where Michigan just has overall the better talent and the revenge angle. And I think I think there's a quiet advantage here for them, that the game is at noon and not at night. I think that makes a field goal difference in the outcome.
Well, you've said it a number of times, at least one superstar elite player on the Michigan defense at each level. And there might be more, actually, that are emerging that I see. The Michigan State-Indiana game may be telling in that, over the course of a 9-game Big Ten schedule, even if you are the best team or second best team in the league, you're gonna hit that one ugly, mid-afternoon Saturday game in the rain where you slog it through for a 17-13 win. Maybe that was Michigan State's game against Indiana, but I really don't think it was. I think those are teams that have comparable talent on the field, and Indiana kind of pulled it together for one game, good enough to hang with Michigan State, and I think that's a precursor. Not that Michigan State's going to get obliterated by the 3 powers in the division or anything like that, but I think that they're going to show, depending on the health of Penn State and the mindset of James Franklin in Penn State, where they rank. They're going to show this. I find it interesting also that if you look at the results against the likes of the Marylands and Rutgers, et cetera, and Indiana, where Ohio State has now come through, and they haven't proven anything against a good team, but still annihilating those three versus what's happened to the other teams. I think this could be a precursor to Ohio State near dominance down the stretch.
Well said. Appreciate it as always, man. Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Steve, good to see you. It'll be interesting to see what our discussion looks like next week.
Indeed. The earth is, we're going to have some tectonic shifts between now and next Tuesday. You betcha. We'll see you then. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, if Michigan loses to Sparty, does it basically wipe out the 7-0 start for you and put Harbaugh right back on the hot seat? And at least within this audience, that's a resounding yes. 2/3 of you said yes to that. Only 1/3 of you said no, I'm totally fine with another meaningless 9 or 10 win season that accomplishes nothing because I'm a complete and total panty waste. Or maybe not quite that's how you put it, but you might say, well, because I have perspective and I'm more forgiving. The rest of us have had plenty of perspective. It's called 7 damn years. All right, 7 years of chump. We've had enough, okay? So 2/3 of you with the right answer, it pretty much wipes out everything that was done up until this point. That is correct. All right, so thank you to the 2/3 of you that got the right answer, which brings us to our feedback of the week from Jeffrey Perpich, who says, yes is the absolutely right answer. This is not a good Michigan team unless they win in East Lansing and Happy Valley. We'll know they're a great team if they can win that last game of the regular season. I mean, you're putting a lot in that Maryland game, Jeffrey. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know it's on the road, but I mean, I don't know if that's the game we should be judging the Wolverines by against the Terps there at the end, but I get you. And he says, you know, the one that currently doesn't exist. No, I don't know which game you're talking about there, Jeff, because it doesn't exist. That'll do it for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. We are back again next week, hopefully, standing at 8-0. Until then, please like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, follow, share, etc. Whichever the case may be here on YouTube or iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, however you watch, listen, access Michigan Podcast. Help us to find more Michigan fans just like you. You can also follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. Keep up to date on what we think. All things maize and blue. Until the next time, I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.